Success shouldn't feel this exhausting. If you're winning on paper, but burning out behind the scenes, you aren't failing. You're stuck in a psychological bottleneck called a hurdle of stop. I've been there. On the outside, things look great, but I was secretly burning out, convinced I was just lucky, and waiting to be exposed as a fraud. I realized I didn't have a business problem. I had a mindset block. Whether it's imposter syndrome, perfectionism, or fear or failure, these aren't just feelings. They are growth bottlenecks. Identify your specific hurdle and get one immediate action step to regain your momentum today. Go to tuepodcast.net/quiz. That's tuepodcast.net/quiz to take the 3-minute assessment and get your report now. This is an Undiscovered Legacy production and proud member of Pod Nation Media Network. All right, Scuba Believers, and if any of you are watching on the YouTube channel, I did have some technical difficulties with that, but that wasn't going to stop me from putting out another episode for you to enjoy. All right, Scuba Believers, let's get across the start line with Louis Dritcham, owner of Near You. Let's go.
Ideas aren't unique. Execution is key. All of us, you, a lot of your listeners, me, go through the cycle where, we sort of work out this idea and think that it's unique. Is it patentable, not patentable? What can I do to protect my idea? And because of that, you don't go out into the market until theoretically you've worked every single angle of the idea out. And then when you go out into the market, it flops. So the first thing I'd say is ideas are rarely unique, right? I won't say never, because there's always the exception to the rule. So each and every entrepreneur, the first thing you have to do is go out and test your idea.
Are you ready to unlock your entrepreneur potential? Are you ready to break free from all the barriers holding you back? Then you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Undiscovered Entrepreneur, your first step in getting across the start line. Let's get across that start line together, right here, right now, on the Undiscovered Entrepreneur. Salutations, Scuba Believers, and we're here again with another amazing entrepreneur. Today we're here with Louis. Hey, Louis, how you doing?
Hey, how are you? I'm excellent, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be in the Undiscovered Entrepreneur, get across the start line. I super appreciate you.
It's me who's appreciative of the fact that you're having me as a guest. It's an honor.
All right. Awesome. All right. So before we get started here, I have one kind of semi-serious question to ask you, okay?
Yep.
All right, here we go. Are you a Scuba believer?
I'm absolutely a Scoob believer. I believe in Scoob, and I was a huge Scooby-Doo fan growing up, so I could say Scoob and Scooby-Doo, yes.
Right, you. All right, Louis, thank you very much for being a Scoob believer and a Scooby-Doo believer. That's amazing. Thank you so much. All right, so right here in the front, what I'd like to do here is just kind of get an idea of who you are, what your entrepreneur venture is, and how you got across the start line in your entrepreneur adventure.
Sure. So I guess I'm what some people would call a serial entrepreneur. Others tend to call it just a repeat entrepreneur, because serial sounds more like serial killer than anything else. And oddly enough, if I was to go back in time, my first entrepreneurial venture, I must have been 10 or 11 years old. Imagine that. And I lived in San Diego County, which is, to most of your listeners in the U.S., they'll know it's on the border between the U.S. and Mexico. And the fact that I was born to Mexican parents, we'd cross over the border once in a while. I'd buy Mexican candy, take it over to the U.S., and then sell it to my schoolmates until I got caught, because most kids would spend all their lunch money on sweets. And I guess that was the end of my first entrepreneurial venture. I found product market fit. However, the law caught me, and because of that, I had to quit. And then since then, I've been involved in a few entrepreneurial endeavors. Happy to share anything that makes sense in those, Scoop.
Fantastic. So what are you doing right now? We started with candy. Where did that take us?
So if I was to go in the timeline, I'll say I'll give you my biggest claim to fame, and then my current claim to fame, if I could. So as I said, I started my first company after the candy debacle when I was still in college, an import-export company, then a direct sales company. And then in the early 2000s, I moved back to Mexico, and I started a tech company that became the first tech startup to get US venture capital funding. Moved back to the US, where I ran the thing for about 14 years. And it's germane to what I'm doing now, because as entrepreneurs, we're often faced with what seem to be an unsurmountable task. And one of them was, even though I had raised funding, the funding was only a few $1 million. And then I realized, if I wanted to fill the entire team, the cost of wages of hiring everyone that I needed was going to be incredibly expensive. So what I did is I filled out key positions in the US, and the rest, leveraging the fact that I knew the Latin American market, I hired them in Mexico. So imagine this: early 2000s, right? 2002, 2003, we had a distributed team, executives in the US, and then a fair amount of support staff in Latin America. And that's sort of how we ran the company over 14 years. We ran it by having distributed teams: India, Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, the UK, and then 2 offices in the US, in Washington, D.C., and we had a Silicon Valley office. Finally, 14 years later, the company gets acquired. So I sort of went into quote unquote retirement with a kick in the butt and a large enough check to consider it. And I started receiving calls from other executives that were trying to do the same thing, offshoring talent, and they weren't successful. So that's what I'm doing now. I started a company by happenstance, by filling a void in the market, by helping executives be successful in their offshore hires. And today, my company's called Nearyu, NIR-YU, and we help startups and mid-market companies from the US hire individuals in Latin America to work remotely for them, so that they can save 60 to 70% in those roles and be able to fill out their talent roles. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but that's what I'm doing now.
That's absolutely fantastic, and it's definitely a gap that we need to fill, especially the having the costs way down to be able to hire out to something that's something that can save you time in the end, because ultimately you need to have that time to be able to be in your zone of genius more and more often. So if you could hire out the things that you don't really need to do at a way that's not too expensive, then it's a great way to do it. And I love the fact that we're hiring all over the world, not just like, it's so different now than it used to be when we were growing up. I'm guessing the age, but when we were growing up before the internet, anything like that, you can only hire people that's around you. But now we can hire talent all over the world that whatever needs to be done can be in their zone of genius, and you could reach into that pool and find somebody that loves to do what they do.
You're absolutely right, Scoop. I mean, my purview is, as you all said, when we were growing up, it was about hiring someone that was, forgetting your region. You had to hire someone that was in your city, and that was willing to commute the 30 minutes that it would take someone to commute to get to your office and work shoulder to shoulder with. And as time has gone by, right? First, we had sort of conference calls, right? And you could have a quasi-distributed team. That's what made what we were doing very unique back in the early 2000s, because we were doing it with no Slack, no WhatsApp, no Zoom, none of those things. It was all sort of fly by the seat of your pants, right? And be able to do it. But back to your comment, as time has progressed, the internet has made it easier for things like what you and I are doing now, right? To contribute even at a distance, and to do it on a daily basis, on a continuous basis, where agility is incredibly important. So I couldn't agree with you more. It used to be hire locally, then it became regionally, then it's statewide, then it doesn't matter if I'm in Vermont and I want to hire someone in Mississippi, and now it's, if I'm in Seattle, wherever, I can hire in Brazil or in Argentina or in Philippines. So absolutely.
So since this is kind of your expertise now, we're hiring out to other people in the world. What can we expect if I were to try to find somebody that say since I'm a podcaster to do editing? What would be the process of that? What can I look forward to when it comes to looking for somebody to outsource like that?
So it's the question you are asking is, believe it or not, incredibly deep, and it's one of the most important questions, because most entrepreneurs assume that hiring offshore or nearshore, and we'll get to those two terms and what they mean in a second. But basically, it's if you're going to hire outside of the US, it's as easy as hiring in the US. And the reality is it may seem to be that way, but the reality is that it is more difficult. In fact, I'll throw a statistic at you, because if it was easy, Scoob, companies like mine wouldn't exist. Let's be honest. We fill a void in the market because it's not so cut and dry as it would seem. 73% of all offshore projects fail. Let me be emphatic when I repeat that. Out of every 100 hires that well-meaning entrepreneurs or mid-market executives make, only 27 of them are successful. And so the question that you ask is, how do we go about it? Let me sort of dive in a bit deeper. And this is the content of a book that I just wrote. It's called The Offshore Team Death Trap. When I was called in to these consulting gigs that I mentioned after having sold my company, I wasn't aware that 73% of offshore projects fail. But I started seeing, that obviously I wouldn't be called in if things were going swimmingly. So every project that I got called into, I started noticing that there were some failure points. And over time, I was called into so many of them that I started to compare and contrast and came up with 7 components of what we call the Offshore Team Death Trap. And these are situations that tend to happen to even the most well-meaning entrepreneur that makes the projects sort of go sideways or even go south. And if people can avoid those, which again is the subject of the book that I wrote, I'm not promoting the book for promotional sake. I'm just saying this isn't a secret formula that we follow. So people can certainly hire my company or other companies like mine, but if they don't want to hire us, all they have to do is, realize these 7 components, and then what we call the remote intelligence framework, that is the way to cure the components. We can get into as much detail as you want in a second, but the ability to understand that there may be a talent mirage, which means skills may look solid on paper, but people that are offshore may fib on their resume, or it's just human nature. So you have to make sure that the skills that people are saying they have it, that they absolutely have it. There may be cultural differences. We call those the cultural chasm, right? And then communication gets bogged down. Hidden cost spiral. If people aren't careful about what they're going to be paying, how they're going to be paying, whether there are additional costs, they may get caught in the hidden cost spiral. Management quicksand. If executives or entrepreneurs don't understand how to create the right set of dashboards that can track execution, then like anything, they may get bogged down in management quicksand. Retention revolving door. Once you hit any of the previous ones, you may start getting rotation, right? Because of the lack of retention. And then all of the investment that you put into an individual that you hired sort of goes out the window or out the door along with them. So you don't want that. Communication fog. If you don't hire correctly and depending on time zones, then there may be communication fog. And lastly, quality erosion. So back to what you said. You want to keep your zone of genius, and because of that, you're willing to hire others in their zone of genius. But if you don't do it correctly, quality erodes, and then there is no genius. There's no genius for you because you're not able to concentrate. and people or the individuals that you hire weren't able to actually fulfill the promise of their zone of genius. And so those are the components of the death traps.
Fantastic. And if anybody wants to take a look at that book, I will have that in the show notes if that's okay, Lewis. Is that okay with you if I do that?
Absolutely.
All right, because that sounds like
Go ahead. Sorry.
It sounds like some great information that we can use as new entrepreneurs to see if we could delegate things out as busy as we can get. Some of us are working another full-time job on top of our entrepreneur. It's just kind of side hustle. We can't always do everything, so being able to outsource some of that stuff would be beneficial.
I couldn't agree with you more. My opinion. Obviously, I'm in the business, but what I can tell you is, I am seeing so many talented individuals that start businesses or that have ongoing concerns. And unfortunately, the war for talent in the US is such that hiring individuals to do certain tasks, some of them strategic at the highest level and some of them tactical, as you said, gets difficult and it's incredibly expensive. So if you can avoid all of the war for talent by hiring remotely in Latin America and at the same time save 70%, it's a godsend to whether it's side hustle or entrepreneurs or mid-market executives, no doubt.
All right, awesome. So a question that just occurred to me as we were talking here is somebody that's new in the entrepreneur field or is just getting their feet wet. We know we need to hire up, but we run into this fear, and that's one of my hurdles to stop. And I was just thinking about this myself is we're kind of afraid to kind of put this stuff out there to somebody else because are they going to do the same kind of job as me? Are they going to be able to do the same thing as I do or something? Is it going to be worse? Who knows? So how do we kind of overcome that hurdle when it comes to outsourcing our
So in the remote intelligence framework, which we created as a way for individuals, for entrepreneurs to counteract the 7 components of the death trap, there are remote is an acronym, stands for rigorous talent selection, expert onboarding and services, managed support and services, optimized team performance, transparent cost plus pricing, and enhanced scalability and growth. To your question, first, you have to trust that you're going to be able to bring on someone and convey your mission and vision and make them part of your team. Be able to integrate them, right, through expert onboarding and integration. One of the things that I'm sure we'll get into, it's that fake it until you make it mentality or imposter syndrome. And everyone feels like an imposter until they actually do it, right? All of us, every single entrepreneur, including me, we've gone through imposter syndrome or fake it until you make it. And the reality is you have to have trust and faith that you're going to be able to do this. Having said that, there are, and I won't get into too much detail unless you want me to, but there are some things that you can do in the expert onboarding and integration stage where you convey to someone, you want to make sure that they are well aligned with your culture. And if someone is remote, culture is not accidental. If someone is working shoulder to shoulder, a lot of the times it's accidental because someone can breathe the culture, live the culture full time. But if someone is working remotely for you, Scoop, you have to be way more intentional. And the way to be intentional is from the moment you hire, you have to hire by voicing your things about your culture, telling them, here's how we work, right? Are we workaholics? Are you going to be left alone? Or am I going to expect a lot of back and forth communication all the time? Right? What sort of time zones will we be working on? Here's my mission. Here's my vision. Do you believe in them? What's your opinion about what we're doing? You sort of have to test for all those things. And in doing that, you can bring them on to have people be fully identified and work with you in a very intentional way of culture and everything else. So that's sort of how you have to do it from the get-go. If you don't do it intentionally, then things won't happen by accident when working remote. I hope that answers your question.
No, answers it perfectly. We have to be able to be willing to let go of the work that needs to be done to somebody else so we could stay in our zone of genius. So we have to vet these people out and make sure they understand what your culture is, what you need to have done, and make sure that they've realized what has to be done. Now, if we want to vet things out, we is that kind of what you do too, as well as just kind of through people and make sure they're good workers, or I'm just trying to understand.
No, as far as what my company does, oh, absolutely. I
Okay.
mean, we go into every engagement. We have a full-fledged interview with the company that is looking to hire to understand all of these characteristics and then understand what they're looking for in each position, right? So we become almost a shrink, right, in trying to understand and get the mindset of the entrepreneur and the company that's going to be hiring. So we want a brain dump and a culture dump so that when we go out and look for these individuals, find them, hire them, and vet them in a technological, but also in a cultural and personality test to make sure that there's going to be alignment. And because we've been doing this for such a long time, we're able to get this much quicker. So yes, that's absolutely part of what we do.
Fantastic. That's awesome. And that's a great way to be able to fill that gap we were talking about earlier, because that's really rough for us to do this ourselves. But if we get to the point where we have to vet out people ourselves and understand, who would be a good fit, who wouldn't. Can you give me kind of like a brief, maybe like a little tidbit of how I would vet out maybe somebody that might be a fit for us, but we're not sure?
Sure. So first, let's go to the R in the remote acronym. So R is you have to be rigorous about talent selection. Right. A lot of entrepreneurs, and I'm sure you and many of your listeners will know, there comes the moment when finally we decide we are going to make a hire. It can be the first hire, the 10th hire, or the 100th hire. Hiring is one of the most important things you can do. So finally, when we make the decision, our mind is made up. We go out into the market, whether it's LinkedIn or job boards or whatever, we post, we bring in resumes, and we're so dead set now in our mentality is I'm going to hire this person that a lot of the time we're not so rigorous about vetting, about finding, about proving, about reference checks, about all these things because we're so far down the road with the decision that's made that now, right, like all entrepreneurs, we're trying to think 5, 10 steps ahead. So we sort of lose track of the execution that's necessary to do the rigorous talent selection. So the first thing one has to do is stop, pause, and understand. Even though your zone of genius may be elsewhere and you want to bring someone on to do part of it, you have to be aware that hiring is one of the most important jobs that you will ever do as an entrepreneur, as an early stage executive. So put everything else on quasi pause. I realize nothing can go on pause because we're juggling 30 jobs at the same time. But this has to be priority number one. So you have to be able to understand what the job is that you want done, create a job description, make sure that the person fits the job description, make sure that you're vetting the talent, the personality, the mindset, and then expert onboarding and integration. Finally, you vetted, you've been rigorous about the process. Now we're back to you have to make sure that you bring people on board in an intentional way that these people are going to work for you correctly. And lastly, if I could, the M the O in the remote intelligence framework is the optimized team performance. You have to, right? It's an absolute must. You have to make sure that the individual, your new employee, understand what the objectives are, how they're going to be measured, how often they're going to be measured, what your expectations are. And if you can do these three, I have a few others in the acronym, but just these three, Scoob, mean that you are going to be more successful than the average entrepreneur that just goes onto a job board, brings them in, and then assumes that things are going to go well.
Fantastic. Amazing information, Lewis. I thank you so much. That actually makes me feel a little bit better too about maybe hiring out. my editing or something like that. That way I have some kind of stepping stones or some kind of list that I can go over to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So thank you very much for that.
Of course.
So I'm a story guy, and it seems like you come across some amazing people in your comings and goings in your business. So I was wondering if there was a story you could share with us about maybe somebody that you vetted, or maybe some whimsical something or other that has happened to you while you're doing your business.
Oh man, I have so many. 7 years of doing the same thing creates a lot of stories. So
Yes.
first, let me get to the bad ones, to the nightmares,
Okay.
and it's gotten worse over the last 12 months. So this is important for your listeners to understand that these are the types of things that happen. Fake it until you make it isn't true only for entrepreneurs. It's true for people that want to fake, pretend that they have the skill sets that are necessary for the job that you want to hire them. I have seen college diplomas that have been forged. I have seen reference calls that, they give you the name of a company and the number that you call, and it turns out that they were a friend of theirs in order to provide references. It's gotten so bad, Scoob, that over the last 3 months, we have now found individuals that pretend to be others with artificial intelligence, faking voice, and even faking, masking their face in order to have you believe that there's someone else. Let me give you more details. So we're big believers that having someone in the same time zone, which is what nearshore staffing is about. There's offshore, where you hire someone that's offshore, India, Pakistan, Ukraine, Philippines, wherever. And then there's nearshore, which is typically Latin American for the US, because the time zones tend to be very similar. So hiring nearshore has sort of the curve has taken off, and hiring offshore, because of real-time communication, is sort of going down. So we have found numerous situations where the person isn't that they take on Latin American physical traits in order to hide their own physical traits, to pretend that they're in Latin America, and they hide their accent, whether Indian, Ukrainian, Chinese, whatever, pretending that they have a Latin American accent in order for them to get a nearshore job instead of an offshore job. And some of these things at the beginning were very hard to spot. Now, we have to ask them questions like, what city do you live in? And then they say, Curitiba, right, in Brazil. Oh, yeah. So you have to ask them some cultural questions about Brazil, right, in order to see if they know that, to be able to spot some fake. So those are the bad side of the story. Some really good stories is I've heard individuals that grew up in the States and decided to move back to their country of origin because of family situations, because of immigration situations, because of whatever, and they end up getting jobs. These are a lot of times individuals that speak English as well as you or I, or your entrepreneurs, and they're now living near shore, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, wherever, and these are people that studied in the US, sometimes even have college degrees, and they can do work from there. So the ability to have these people work remotely in a culture that they grew up with is incredible. And lastly, I've seen so many stories, Scoob, where the people that are working near shore are going to charge, or the cost is going to be 30 to 40% of what they would be in the US. And instead of complaining that they're getting paid bottom of the rung wages, they're so incredibly grateful, because even wages at those 60 to 70% savings are typically higher than they are locally. So you have someone that is going to be incredibly grateful. They're able to build out their house. They're able to pay for health insurance. They're able to do these things in the country where they're living. And if they were working for a local company, they wouldn't be able to do. So you have incredibly grateful individuals that are doing top-notch work in real time, and it just creates a circle of gratitude that I've seen play out over and over and over, and it makes mine warm, obviously, my heart warm and fuzzy. But it creates a situation where these employment agreements or collaboration agreements are long lasting, go into many, many years. I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Thank you so much for that. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. It's thank you for giving me both sides of the story too, because we always hear about the good stuff, but sometimes we need to hear about the stuff that might be kind of happening there so we can look out for it. So that's good advice with great story. I love it.
Absolutely.
All right. So I want to ask here, if you had a new entrepreneur that's just getting started in their entrepreneur adventure, like you happen to run in the street or whatever it is, what first piece of advice would you give them? What steps would you have them take?
Wow. Well, the first thing is ideas aren't unique. Execution is key. All of us, you, a lot of your listeners, me, go through the cycle where, we sort of work out this idea and think that it's unique. Is it patentable, not patentable? What can I do to protect my idea? And because of that, you don't go out into the market until theoretically you've worked every single angle of the idea out. And then when you go out into the market, it flops. So the first thing I'd say is ideas are rarely unique, right? I won't say never, because there's always the exception to the rule. So each and every entrepreneur, the first thing you have to do is go out and test your idea. Does it have a market? Does it have people that are willing to pay money for whatever you're looking to do? You have to test your mettle against the biggest competitor of all, and the biggest competitor is the market, because the market is the sum of every single other competitor that's out there. So go out there and test your mettle. That's the first one. Second of all is always be pitching, but always be listening. You have to listen to what the market tells you, because as entrepreneurs, we think sometimes a meeting didn't go well, and then, we, as entrepreneurs, we're hard-headed, we're stubborn, and we just sit there and say, he didn't get it. Next guy will get it. And we all need to be stubborn. Please don't take what I'm saying to say at the first signal that they didn't get it or didn't buy from you, don't give up, because that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's a balance between the behavior that is such that you want to get your message out there, but you always have to be listening as well in order to be able to balance these. And sometimes you just push aside the naysayers, but sometimes you have to also, here's something that this person said that if I just fix, then maybe he would have said yes. So no one says no to what you're saying in an absolute manner. They may be saying no to details, right? Or to specific characteristics. So that would be my best advice, combining the persistence of entrepreneurship with the absolute must that has to be keeping your ears open to balance these out. And if I could, I'll go to the second one. And the second one is, and I've heard you say this a few times on this on today's podcast and in different chapters of podcast, and it's zone of genius. You have to be aware that you have a zone of genius. And if you try doing way too many things, then you may be obscuring your zone of genius because of other things that you have to do. Fortunately, there are individuals that can do this work nearshore and do it at 30% of the cost that they would do in the US. So whereas before you had to wait until the absolute last moment to hire someone to sort of help you maintain that zone of genius, the good news is you can now do it at 70% less cost. And because of that, you may be able to hire earlier. And in doing that, maintain yourselves in that zone of genius with the proper support that previously you wouldn't be able to do because of the cost.
Woo! Very, very good. I like that,
Thank
Lewis.
you.
That's very good. A lot of great information there. Don't wait. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Put something out there. And when you do put something out there, listen to the feedback, not just the good feedback, but the bad feedback too, because that actually will give you what you need to work on to get over that hurdle of people saying no?
Yeah, that's a great way to summarize it. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so fantastic. Thank you. All right. So, Lewis, I have this tradition with all my guests. In the next 6 months, where do you see yourself in your company? Do you have a 6-month goal for yourself in your company?
So we do set up goals. We set yearly goals. When we were smaller, we used to have 6-month goals. Now we tend to be more yearly. But having said that, we do. I'm a big believer of an author named Vern Harnish, who wrote this book about scaling up, and I'm having yearly, semester, and then quarterly goals. And then if you're able to even get those goals down to dailies, then it's the best way to manage your company. So we do have daily calls with all our staff in order to make sure that we continue to be aligned to that true north of the objectives. But to respond to your question, where do I see myself in the next 6 months? We have a few new offerings that we're testing in the market. One would think that hiring nearshore talent, right, is it's unique enough where you can't have different types of hires, or the way you build, the way again, details, right? It's what some people call inside baseball. But what we have found in our desire to eat our own home cooking, as they say, or I think Larry Ellison used to say, you have to eat your own dog food. So in a desire to eat our own dog food, when we're still going out into the market 7 years later, we continue to hear people say, thank you, no, because. And we've heard that. So we're putting out a few new offerings to try to counteract those no's. And then it's basically just growing. We're at the point where we're not quite at the product market fit, as they say, but it's just a matter of keep testing the market, with more marketing in order to be able to get more no's, and then be able to improve on the offering that we're putting out there to be able to sort of hit that hockey stick growth.
All right, awesome. So what I'd actually like to do with you, Lewis, is follow up with you in 6 months and have another interview just like this one. I want to see if you put those new offerings out. I want to see if you hit that hockey stick like you said just a second ago. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely. I'd love to do that. That way you keep me honest.
That's right, because you're not just accountable to me, you're accountable to all my scuba believers out there. No pressure.
And my wife.
And yeah, definitely.
All those of us who are married or have a a significant other, that's the first person we're accountable, not even ourselves, right? That they come in and ask, how is that going? So yes, that's number one. Ourselves number two, and then you and your audience. I'll make sure to have that.
Okay. Looking forward to that. All right, Lewis, this is your time to shine. This is the time I want you to advertise yourself. Anything you want to advertise, this is the place to do it. Okay. Ready, set, go.
Thanks. So, look, the only thing I can advertise, and I think it's been the topic of today's podcast throughout, is whether an entrepreneur in an early stage startup, in a startup that is growing, or in a mid-market company, we all need to hire. We need to hire to maintain our zone of genius. And if you can hire others to bring in their zone of genius and contribute to the joint goal that we all want to accomplish. That's what we do. That's what my company Near You, NIR-YU does. That's what we specialize in. We've been able to go from a 27% success rate to a 95% success rate, documented, by using the remote intelligence framework that I spoke about and that I talk about at length in my book, The Offshore Team Death Trap. So my advertisement, or the advertisement that I would put out to you, to your listeners, to the community, is hire earlier than before, because it'll cost you less. Be willing to scale. You're not, if you do it correctly, these individuals are going to help you achieve your zone of genius. And if we can help, great. And if you don't want to pay someone like us, read my book. It's a very small investment, right? I don't make much money. I believe I sell it at $4.99, the digital version. So believe me, I'm not doing this for riches. I'm putting this out there in the community because I want more people to be successful. So advertisement for my book, for the content of the book, and then if you want or need someone like us to do it for or with you, I'd be happy to talk to you. Give me a shout, whether on LinkedIn or over email.
All right. Louis, thank you so much for all that great information. This has been an absolute blast, and I've learned so much from you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be on the Undiscovered Entrepreneur.
It's been a pleasure. You've challenged me in order to get more knowledge than I thought I had out to your community, and for that, I'm grateful to you. And to everyone, thank you for taking some time to listen to me.
All right, Scuba Believers, make sure you stay tuned for the wrap-up. All right, everybody, thank you. Bye-bye. All right, Scuba Believers, that was Louis. Man, what an awesome conversation we had. I love being able to talk to somebody that's in that type of industry to let people know that there are ways to do things out there that are helpful, that aren't really as expensive as you might think. But in the conversation, I do have two major takeaways I want to talk to you right now about. Ideas are worthless without execution. Stop projecting perfection and start testing reality. Your brilliant concept isn't unique until you prove the market will pay for it. So get out there today, fail faster, learn quicker, and get customer feedback. Not ego feedback, customer feedback. Guide your next movement towards actual success. Put it out there, see what people have to say, push your ego aside just for a little while. I know it's kind of tough for some people, but we can actually do this and see what people buy and purchase from you. And let's not guess what they're going to actually do. That way we can put something out there that's going to be awesome, and we know it's going to be awesome because people are already waiting for it. Your zone of genius is suffocating under tasks you shouldn't be doing. Hire earlier, not later. Stop waiting until you're ready to delegate. With Nearshore talent at 30% of U.S. costs, you can afford to protect your genius now and build a team that turns your vision into an empire instead of burnout. It's so important to right away find ways to be able to stay in your zone of genius, because that's where you're going to do your best work. Now, when you're first starting out, you're going to wear a lot of hats. I'm going to be honest with you. You're probably going to do everything yourself. But as soon as you can, whatever is not in your zone of genius, delegate or automate. Get it out of your hair. That way you can stay in your zone of genius longer, work better, work more efficient, and with less burnout. And with that, I want to say thank you, Scuba Believers, for another fantastic episode, and I will see you next week. Goodbye, everybody. And there you have it, future entrepreneurs. We've taken another step towards our journey to get across that start line. Remember, every great business starts with a single idea and the courage to pursue it. You've already shown that courage by joining us here today. As we wrap up this episode of The Undiscovered Entrepreneur, I want to remind you that the start line isn't as far away as you might think. With each bit of knowledge you gain, each fear you face, you're getting closer to launching your dream. Until our next episode together, keep pushing, keep dreaming, and most importantly, keep taking those steps across the start line. They'll all add up to big strides in your entrepreneur adventure. This is Scoob, your guide across the start line. Remember, your future is waiting. I can, I am, I will, and I'm doing it today. Hello, Scuba Believers. Let me ask you a real quick question. How many cups of coffee have you had today? 3, 5, 7? And let me guess, you've got a Red Bull in the other hand just in case, right? Yeah, I see you. Now, here's the truth bomb nobody wants to hear. You're not building a business. You're building a caffeine dependency. Listen, I get it. When you're grinding 12, 14, 16-hour days, you're building something from nothing. When you've got payroll to meet, investors to impress, and visions that won't wait. You need fuel. But what if I told you that the fuel that you're using is actually slowing you down? What if the very thing that you think is keeping you sharp is actually making you dull? Enter Rise Coffee. This isn't your grandma's mushroom tea. This isn't some hippie wellness trend. This is science meets performance. And here's what makes Rise different. Less than half the caffeine of a regular cup of coffee. But here's the kicker. You won't miss it. 6 organic powerhouse mushrooms, including cordyceps, what Olympic athletes use, and lion's mane, what Silicon Valley biohackers swear by. Sustained energy that doesn't spike and crash. We're talking smooth, clean power from morning to moonlight. Crystal clear focus without the jitters. Imagine closing the deal with calm, confident mind instead of the caffeine chaos. Gut health and immune support, because what's the point of building an empire if you're too sick to enjoy it? So here's the challenge to you. Stop borrowing energy from tomorrow. Stop running on fumes and call it a hustle. Stop wearing your caffeine addiction like a badge of honor. Real entrepreneurs optimize, real entrepreneurs adapt, real entrepreneurs win. You can't win if you're crashing at 2 p.m. while your competition is just getting started. Break the cycle. Head to risesuperfoods.com right now and use code PODNA15 for 50% off your first order. That's PODNA15 for 15% off. Try it for 30 days. If you don't feel the difference, if you don't feel sharper, calmer, more focused, more alive, then go back to your 6-a-day cup habit. But I'm telling you, you won't, because once you feel what real energy feels like, you'll never go back. Ditch the addiction, fuel your empire, and rise up. Rise Coffee, energy that builds, not burns.